You fall asleep, and somewhere in the dark, something is watching you. Not literally. Not the way that sentence sounds. But tonight, while you're gone, while your conscious mind is offline and your brain is replaying the day in fragments, the dog at the foot of your bed might be doing the same thing. Running somewhere. Chasing something. And maybe, in some version of that something, there's a face that looks like yours. That's the surface question. But the deeper one is stranger. It isn't really about dreams. It's about what it means to be significant to another mind, one that didn't evolve language, doesn't have a theory of your psychology, and yet has spent its entire existence learning the specific texture of you. The question isn't just whether animals dream about humans. It's whether, inside a non-human brain, something like you can exist at all. The science of animal dreaming is younger than you'd think, and weirder than it sounds. In 2001, researchers Matthew Wilson and Kenway Louie at MIT published a study in the journal Neuron that would quietly rearrange everything we assumed about rat cognition. They recorded the hippocampal activity of rats as they ran through a maze. Then they recorded the same neurons during REM sleep. The patterns weren't similar. They were, in some sequences, nearly identical, specific enough that the researchers could identify, from the sleeping brain alone, where in the maze the rat had been. The rat wasn't just sleeping, it was replaying. Reprocessing a specific experience, moment by moment, inside a mind that had no words to describe it. What this told us wasn't just that rat's dream. It was that dreaming, at least in its hippocampal form, appears to be a mechanism for memory consolidation. The sleeping brain returns to what mattered during waking life, runs it again, encodes it more deeply, which means the content of dreams isn't random. It's weighted by salience, by what the waking brain registered as important. And here is where it gets uncomfortable. For a dog, a rat, a crow, or a horse, you are not background noise. You are, in many cases, the most cognitively demanding feature of their entire environment. You are unpredictable. You are emotionally variable. You control food, safety, freedom, and social warmth. If the sleeping brain replays what mattered, and you are what matters most, then the logic isn't mystical. It's almost mechanical. But dreams aren't only memory replay, and the story doesn't stop with rodents. In 2019, Gilles Laurent and his team at the Max Planck Institute for Brain Research published something that, genuinely, nobody was expecting. They were studying sleeping lizards, specifically Australian bearded dragons, and they found clear evidence of two distinct sleep stages, slow-wave sleep and REM sleep. This mattered enormously, because REM sleep was previously thought to be a mammalian and avian feature. Reptiles weren't supposed to have it. The discovery suggested that the neural architecture underlying dreaming might be far older than we assumed, perhaps 320 million years old, predating the split between reptiles, birds, and mammals. What this means is that dreaming may not be a late evolutionary luxury. It may be ancient infrastructure, a conserved function, built into vertebrate brains so long ago that the original template was inherited across a staggering range of creatures. Which raises a question that nobody has cleanly answered. If the mechanism is that old, what was it for before mammals, before complex social bonds, before anything resembling what we call a relationship? The honest answer is, we don't fully know. What we do know is that in species that form strong social attachments, and that group is larger than most people realize, the evidence suggests that social information is prominently encoded and reprocessed during sleep. Elephants are one of the better studied cases. Joyce Poole, a behavioral biologist who has spent decades with the Amboseli elephant populations in Kenya, has documented what she and her colleagues describe as REM-like behavioral states, muscle twitching, eye movement, altered posture, during sleep. Elephants have also been observed vocalizing softly while apparently asleep, producing sounds resembling those used in social contact calls. Whether this constitutes dreaming in any meaningful sense, Poole is careful not to claim. But the fact that sleep in elephants appears to involve social vocalization patterns is not nothing. The common assumption is that animals live entirely in the present, reacting, not reflecting. Science has been slowly, quietly dismantling this idea for 30 years. In 2006, Nicola Clayton and colleagues at the University of Cambridge, researchers who had already demonstrated episodic-like memory in western scrub jays, published work suggesting that these birds don't just remember what happened and where. They appear to remember who was watching. Jays that had been observed caching food by other jays were significantly more likely to re-hide that food when alone later. They modeled another bird's perspective. They anticipated future theft from a specific individual. That's not instinct. That's something closer to social strategizing, running a mental model of another creature's intentions, and acting on it before that creature can act on you. If a jay can hold a mental model of another individual during waking life, the question of whether that model persists into sleep becomes less abstract. Sleep, remember, is when the brain consolidates what it used during the day. And social modeling, tracking individuals, remembering their behavior, predicting their moves is metabolically expensive. It's exactly the kind of content you'd expect the sleeping brain to rehearse. There's a twist here, though, and it cuts against a comfortable story. We tend to imagine that if animals dream about us, it must resemble something warm. The dog running toward you, the elephant remembering your voice. But Wilson and Louie's rats weren't dreaming about their researchers, they were replaying the maze. The salient thing wasn't the human. It was the task, the space, the challenge the human had constructed. Which suggests that even when we're the architects of an animal's environment, we may not be the protagonists of their inner world. We might be more like weather, a condition of existence rather than a subject of contemplation. That realization is either humbling or clarifying, depending on your disposition. It also points to a deeper problem with the question itself. When we ask whether animals dream about humans, we're projecting a cognitive structure, the character-driven narrative dream, that may not map onto what's happening in a non-human brain. Human dreams are saturated with faces, voices, social dynamics, emotional stakes. We dream in story, but there's no particular reason to think a sleeping lizard's brain does the same, or a crow's, or even a dog's, despite our best hopes. What the evidence points to instead is something more functional and less literary. Sleeping brains appear to process what is behaviorally significant. In animals with strong social bonds, that significance often involves specific individuals, and in domesticated species, those individuals are frequently human. Whether that processing ever surfaces as anything resembling a narrative, a face, a remembered warmth that is genuinely beyond what the current science can say. Researchers like Antonio Damasio at the University of Southern California have argued for years that consciousness, feeling, and the sense of self exist on a continuum, that the neural substrates underlying emotion in mammals are deeply conserved, and that drawing hard lines between human inner experience and animal inner experience is more philosophical preference than scientific conclusion. That debate is ongoing, and the honest position is that nobody has resolved it. What is not debated is that the brains of social animals maintain detailed representations of other individuals. That sleep reorganizes and reinforces those representations, and that in species who have spent thousands of years in close proximity to humans, dogs, horses, certain primates and research settings, the human figure occupies an unusually large share of that social attention. Somewhere between neuroscience and philosophy, that matters. You close your eyes tonight, and your brain will do what it always does, return to what it found significant, run the day's experiences through a process that is not quite memory and not quite imagination, and surface something that may or may not resemble the truth of what happened. The dog will do something similar. The crow outside your window, if it has spent enough time watching you, may encode something about the shape you make against the sky. Whether any of that constitutes dreaming about you in a meaningful sense, whether there is something it is like to be that crow, holding something like a model of you in the dark, is a question that science can approach but cannot yet fully enter. What it can tell us is this: being remembered, being modeled, being significant to another mind, these are not uniquely human experiences. They appear to be features of nervous systems that evolved to N.